Well, we have a program lined up, and it will go through different issues in a way that can bring the facts to your purview. So let us start with the first one. I'm going to invite my esteemed colleague, Dr. Khan, and Stephanie Amogo to come to the podium and present a tale of their journey to Tijuana, which happened about maybe a month ago, a little longer than that. So, Sabit.
Very good morning to all of you, and thank you, Dr. Damoy. So here we have a short presentation of a project that we put together. I teach a class called Nonprofit Management in the MPPA program. I see some of my students here who've taken that class. And as part of that class, I've always tried to experiment, tried to offer some experiential learning exercises for our students and to take them on field visits. Either field visits, or typically we do a strategic planning exercise where small groups of students actually work on a real strategic plan or part of a strategic plan for either an organization or a project. And this time around, I said, why don't we switch up things a little bit and go south of the border? It's a little risky, it's a little out of the box, but I said, let's try it. And thanks to the help of Dr. Cristina Sanchez and her office, they gave their blessing. They said, okay, it's something to try. So I identified over a period of time several migrant shelters that I personally knew and actually visited, and also a very interesting connection at the Colegio Frontera Norte, which is one of the leading research institutions and universities that focuses on migration. So I opened it up to all my students in that class, and three brave souls took up that offer, one of whom is Stephanie. She's here with us. We have a short video that we can sort of captures that experience, as well as Stephanie will speak briefly on the journey itself. Headed to Mexico with three of our MPPA students. Go ahead, Stephanie.
So I'm an internal volunteer, so we stay on the fourth floor. And then some people come for, I think it's between 3 months and a year. So I'm here for 3 months. There are people that are here for a year. And then we also have our external volunteers that come once a week to help. So we have a lady that's from San Diego. She comes once a week.
Practice when they belong into majority religion, and now here in Tijuana they are, for example, here they bring up an Aztec dance group to celebrate the
quantitative of the members of this program. I studied previously economics.
Our first world country. A lot of people don't have access. I pay $2,000 a month for my healthcare and my son, and I have to wait 2 months to get a basic general appointment or once you get emergency care. So it's not good, and I pay good money. And it's good to know that healthcare workers, they're for universal health care. Some are for universal health care. You would think it's the contrary, they might get paid less, but some are for it, and we should be listening to them. So CAPA is a very good organization that
So I want to invite Stephanie Gamboa, one of the students who participated, to share a few words, and then we hand it over to Professor Cynthia Duarte or Professor Akiko, who should be here.
Hi, good morning. I am here and I'm going to try to convey what I learned from my visit to the Transitional Migrant Center. So one thing that stands out, the human soul starts to see that there is community at the center. And it's surprising because these people are leaving. They're coming from really difficult situations. And you would expect them to be having a hard time, but for some reason, they assimilated very well. And one would wonder, what is the nonprofit doing to make it work? So what we noticed that the nonprofit had to do is they found common things with the people. They were coming from different countries. Sometimes they come from all over the world, but currently during our visit, the ones staying there were mainly from Latin America. They were families. Unfortunately, you have to navigate differences, and the migrant centers had to make certain adjustments, so only families were there. So that meant that single men and adolescent children that were men had to go to a different facility. But nevertheless, it was successful because these folks, they were together, they were laughing, they were helping each other, taking care of their children. They were able to do this because the nonprofits were strategic. They were teaching them skills. They were teaching them how to do basic trades. They had social workers teaching them about work opportunities nearby. They had medical care on site, and it was really nice to see that the shelter not only was teaching them how, giving them a survival space, but they were teaching them, like empowering them to adapt on their own. So what we learned is that many of these families, they built a sense of cohesive community that after a while they have to leave the shelter. They would form unions so strong that they would leave together as a family and find a space. And I found it very empowering that these nonprofits had created a pathway to not only give them a temporary space, but to empower them for success in the future. It was an amazing experience to see that all we need is some few things in common to make things work. And thank you for your time. I hope you guys have a great conference.
It's my pleasure to invite my esteemed colleagues, Cynthia Duarte and Akiko Yasuke, who have been studying immigrants in Ventura County and other places, and their research is based on that topic. I believe they're coming with their student, Jonathan Leon. So please, there are time, to listen and maybe ask questions. We're building a little more time, so that's good, to be more relaxed other than going from one to another quickly. Cynthia.
Hi, everybody. We are the qualitative team of this research that we're doing. I'm Cynthia Duarte. I'm assistant professor of sociology here at Cal Lutheran. I'm also the director, I'm supposed to be in the mic better. I'm also the director of the Center for Equality and Justice. Wanted to introduce Dr. Sabbath Khan, who I know a lot of you know. He's also part of the qualitative team. He's been really instrumental, particularly in terms of our research on remittances, as well as helping us navigate and network with some of you guys in the community. I'll go ahead and let, I'll introduce you. Want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dr. Akiko Yasuke in sociology, and I'm a part of this team, and I will talk later. Thank you.
Yes. This pilot study we did, Akiko and I were co-facilitators of the Culver Scholarship or Research Opportunity for students in the social sciences here at Cal Lutheran. So we had a few students that were working with us to put together the literature review, to help with establishing the interview guide, and then doing some pilot research in this project. Yay! And so we're gonna give him a time to take a deep breath, but we also have Jonathan Leon here, who is a senior in the sociology department. And so he's one of our students that was part of our research. So you'll be hearing from him and what he did, as well as some of the other findings that our other two students discovered for us. So we are very excited to be here today because we really need to meet you, and please, we'll be kind of walking the room, and hopefully you can introduce yourselves to us. We are still in the collection phase of our data, and we need as much help in the community as we can. So please, if you have questions afterwards, find one of us about the research, about collaborating, perhaps helping us with finding respondents. We'd really, really appreciate it. So really simple, who we're looking for in our research. We are looking to interview adults who've migrated from Mexico and settled in Ventura County, preferably within the last 10 years or so. We want a more recent experience, so it's not hard and fast, oh, you didn't come on this date by 10 years, but we want sort of a more recent experience, because what's been happening in Ventura County over the last 10 years, I think, has been a significant there have been significant historical moments. The Trump administration, SB 54, right? There have been significant things that have happened, and so we want folks that have kind of engaged with that in a more recent way. We prefer those who've migrated as adults. I understand, though, that that's not always the experience, but what we're sort of not looking for is we're not looking for the children of undocumented immigrants who came and settled and went to school here. We're looking for folks who've engaged with the labor market. So, you know, it's okay if people are young, but more sort of folks who came to sort of engage with the labor market in Ventura County. Obviously, recruiting during COVID-19 was very, very challenging. You know, our students and all of us did you know, as best as we could, but it was a really challenging time to recruit respondents. So we're kind of ramping up, ready to get going, our interview guide's ready, and we're excited about meeting with more members of the community. Thank you. So our thesis is very simple. What is the migration experience to Ventura County? As a complement to the quantitative team, who are doing really important work on economic and other drivers that help, that drive people to make the decision to leave Mexico and come to Ventura County, we as a qualitative team are conducting interviews to really understand, again, what is the migration experience to Ventura County specifically. Key areas of inquiry, right, to complement the quantitative team is settlement, right, reasons for migration and settlement. We also want to understand their local and transnational networks. What is their economic well-being? To put simply, how are you getting by? What is life like here? How are you juggling things? And of course, in our most recent history, COVID-19, that has had a tremendous amount of impacts on this community. Ultimately, right, sort of the cloud that many of these this population is living under is a cloud of anti-immigrant sentiment, is a cloud of policies or practices that are not welcoming to this population, regardless of how much they contribute. And so we want to sort of understand that experience as well. Okay. So I'm going to take on sort of our first section of our research, which is comparing, we will be comparing the economic and migration data that the quantitative team collects, as well, and then inputting sort of what we find from folks in our community about their migration and initial settlement. What are their drivers? What are their important networks to make those initial decisions? Transnational experiences. How do they engage with remittances, kinship ties, networks, and of course labor participation, particularly as they enter into the labor market. So next slide. So the reason for migration and settlement. People have a variety of drivers. What we know from the literature is that there isn't one reason why someone would make the decision to come to the United States, but we want to capture those stories. For example, this one person talks about what they were thinking before they migrated to the United States. I'm not going to read the whole quote just because I know we're limited on time, but I have it up here if you want to continue looking at it. More than nothing, many of us come with a wrong idea that living in the United States will be the same as living in Mexico, when in reality, it's not the truth. Well, it could be, but not many people do it. Not a lot of people live in the same place. They rent, but only a certain number of people are permitted to live in the same place. And regarding the living situation here, you know that it is very expensive. Here, everyone must accommodate themselves to their own possibilities, but many come with the belief that it is easier to live here or that they will live like they did in the United States. So capturing this is what I thought there, this is what the reality was, we think that kind of story is really important to tell in terms of really understanding how someone is navigating the experience coming here. Just to also point out, these are translations. So our interviews were done in Spanish, so these are English translations. Thank you to our students who also did the amazing translations for us. That was a lot of hard work. Initial work experience, entering the labor market here in Ventura County can be really challenging. The networks might not be well established here in the United States, and that first job you get may actually have elements of exploitation, or you may not understand the labor market, and that becomes very challenging. For example, we have two respondents here who talk about the challenges when they first entered the labor market here in Ventura County. One talked about being exploited in terms of her pay. However, they would pay me poorly, according to the lady, since she was only helping me. She would give me so much plus food when a person who worked regularly at the taqueria was paid double. So regular pay was somewhere between $180 to $200 a week, and they would only give me $100 and food. But it was something, so I decided to take it. So these stories are going to be very common. Another one worked in domestic work and found it really challenging, particularly entering Ventura County. She said, I worked for about 8 years with an American family taking care of children as a babysitter. I didn't understand any English and didn't know a word of English. At that time, it was very difficult for me. I told my sister, I'm not going to work there because I don't understand anything. So she goes on to say in this quote, right, that it was really stressful. There was a lot of pressure in this home. Even if the people who she was working for tried to sort of teach her English, she said it was really difficult. And in the research on domestic work, we find that live-in situations are the most stressful, sort of, but often, always, not always, but often that first domestic work job that someone coming to the United States might get. Ultimately, she finds this to be very, very stressful and ends up leaving this home after 8 years and decides that the fields are actually a place where she's going to have a better economic chance here in Ventura County. We also know from the literature, and we see in some of our first interviews, that the reason to come to the United States is so that you can help family members back in Mexico. And so we're going to have examples of this. But I think what's key here is, even though the literature tells us that, what I think is wonderful about qualitative work is you get to hear the nuance of how people are framing their help back home, what they're doing, what the sacrifices they're making in their life here in order to make that possible. So again, like many of our immigrants in our community, right, I was working day and night. I would leave at 4 a.m. to go to work all the way to Fillmore. I would pick chiles and jalapenos. I would then go home and shower and eat. I would pack my lunch, go to the warehouse, right? This sort of multiple jobs, intense labor in order to make ends meet and to help out back home. Another respondent was, I was the youngest one, but I also had a younger brother, and I told myself, I'm going to work so my brother can study and go to school because I didn't have that chance to. So again, these international ties, remittance ties, emotional ties are very important to our residents here in Ventura County. In terms of our next section is in terms of getting by here, I'm going to hand that over to Akiko. Thank you very much for your time.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Good. Okay. How can I follow such an excellent presentation, right? But I will make it easier for my student, Jonathan, our student, Jonathan Leon. Okay. So our study also explores how undocumented immigrants in Ventura County navigate everyday life in here. So once you are here, so settling down, and then a lot of actually struggles that they experience, and how they navigate or deal with struggles or obstacles that they face with. The first, but we have actually 4 areas that we pay attention to. The first area is social networks. And a lot of literature indicates that social networks are fantastic and they can help newcomers in particular settle down and getting a job, everything else. But also social networks can be burdens. Sometimes the social networks can be exploitative also. So just we will pay attention to that. Second part is economic well-being, how they economically survive, generally speaking. And then I can tell that they are not making really a lot of money. But in new area, in Ventura County, just in my family class, we talked about median income in Ventura County. Actually, median income in Ventura County is higher than median income in LA County. So it's really harder to actually make a living or live a comfortable life, and how they manage to do that. And number three, legal concerns and anti-immigrant sentiment. So that was a really big thing. And when we were under the previous president policies, and how they dealt with fear of deportation, and also ICE and then police when they go out there. And number four, lastly, access to healthcare and the impact of COVID. This is a big thing, and a lot of literature indicates that oftentimes, and so my students also said that, even my dad fainted, and we were all just so concerned about him, and then called for ambulance. But then he said that no, don't call for ambulance because it's going to be very expensive. So oftentimes they sacrifice like a health for whatever they need to kind of cover in the household. So these are the four areas we focused on. Okay, but for our presentation, me and Jonathan, and we are going to focus on the last two themes. Oh, thank you. Okay, so the third theme is this is a fear of ICE, police, and the deportation. All participants talked about their fear, basically. The first, she did not read the quotes, but I will. We had a very difficult time when there were raids. Where we work, then the bosses told us not to go out. They are doing raids, don't go out. Those with papers went by car to look for immigration officials, and they spoke on the phone with the boss. They would tell us not to go out because immigration is at all the corners. There was one on that side. He filled 2 buses, and they were on the other side, about 3 blocks away, 4. So this participant actually experienced some ICE raids while working in the fields. Okay. Thank you. So I will skip the second one, but just you can probably take a look at it later. Because we are running out of time, and I want to give enough time to Jonathan. Okay, so, but there is Ventura, I don't know, but especially in California, which is a sanctuary city, but no, I do not feel safe, because this interviewee was asked if he feels safe in Ventura County, and basically he said no, even though he knows that California is a sanctuary state. In reality, there hasn't been much pressure by ICE. But regardless, because of President Trump, there was always the uncertainty of being 30, 40 years old and not having papers. There is always that thought in your head that in whatever moment it can happen to you, especially if you have small family. So just as I said, this participant did not feel safe living in Ventura County, particularly under Trump administration. But what we started to notice is that even president changed, but still the lingering effect is in there. I'm not going to read the next one, but somewhat, okay, even now the new president, the situation changed, but that kind of feeling of kind of fear, and it can happen, and still that seems to be affecting many immigrants. Okay, next I will pass this to Jonathan Leon, our student, and a fantastic student. We had 3 students who received Culver Research Fellowship, but 2 of them already graduated, so I want to recognize them. And Amber Mendoza, a psychology major, and also Yvonne Sanchez, criminal justice and criminology major. So they already graduated, so for that reason, they are working up there. So that's the reason why they are not with us. But still, Jonathan is with us. He is a sociology and Spanish double majors. and he will discuss healthcare among undocumented immigrants. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? Great. So this is the first this is the first presentation that I've done in front of a big audience like this. But I want to go through a little bit of the literature review that I've done. Some of it talked about how social networks have such a positive effect on, in general, people, that they decrease the amount of time that one does get sick and the time that one needs to recover from an illness. I won't read the entire literature review for the sake of time, but there were different ways that social network, meaning social network of people, that they affected both men and women. Some of these detriments included stress, anxiety, and loneliness. And obviously those can increase the likelihood of an illness within the immigrant population. Thank you. In regards to the COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy and the lack of information, one of our interviewees discussed how it was a small amount of people that couldn't or didn't want to, some because of their health, because there were some pregnancies, and they were unsure of whether they could or couldn't. This particular interviewee expressed how, unlike herself, there were many individuals who didn't feel sort of comfortable with getting the vaccine due to their pregnancy, as well as that there are many other people that didn't have the necessary information to go ahead and decide whether or not they were going to get the vaccine. Another interviewee said that, well, I was nervous because it was going to hurt. I was scared. I was going to die. OMG. So this interviewer expressed how they were there was a fear of the actual vaccine. So to coexist with the hesitancy and the lack of information, of course, that obviously led to some fear about the vaccine and what its effects could be on the human body. The other part of my project was the financial instability and healthcare, and of course the access to this healthcare. One interviewee stated that, and for us, because of our undocumented status, it is difficult to have general healthcare because it was very expensive. As many of you already know, healthcare is a luxury and not necessarily something that is afforded to everyone, especially undocumented immigrants. So to access this healthcare, they would have to pay out of pocket rather than rely on any insurance or health plan that they have. Another interviewer stated that the reason is one of the many reasons why we don't visit the doctor much or that our health deteriorates a lot is because we are postponing care and instead of use money for things like food to eat. Again, they have to decide whether or not to use that money to care for themselves or to care for their family members by buying the necessities such as food, water, or even pay for their home that they rent or anything like that. Another interviewee stated that because us as illegal or immigrants, however they want to call it, can't benefit from missing 3 or 4 days of work, especially if you have a family, you can't stop working for more than a week, or else you will fall behind on house payments, rent, or other bills you may have. Again, this reiterates the fact that they must decide whether or not they're going to spend that money on themselves to care for themselves, or pay on the necessities like bills, rent, or other house payments. And obviously that leads to the deterioration of an undocumented immigrant health, and of course, again, they must decide whether or not they have to use that money to pay for that health care. All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm concluding our presentation. And it's just gonna feel like we are not the experts, you guys are experts actually. And then but maybe you are thinking, oh, Kiko and Cynthia, we all know these things, right? But all of our teams, including students who graduated and also, Sabith, right, and sitting there. And what we want to do is to make a contribution to this collective effort to make sure that undocumented immigrants live a comfortable life in Ventura County because they deserve it, and then also we need them, and that they are supporting Ventura County economy from the bottom, and all of us kind of know it. And also, we are qualitative researchers, so that means that data for us is life stories of undocumented immigrants. So by obtaining and also presenting life stories of undocumented immigrants, what happened to them, how they felt about what happened, we are trying to put a human face to our immigration debate. So they are not the numbers, that they are humans. And presenting that life stories to public beyond the communities of immigrants and also allies, right, to the public over there, so that they kind of see them as humans, not just the immigrants or Mexicans or farm workers, not that kind of categories, so that they can relate to them at the basic human levels. So that's kind of what we are trying to do as qualitative researchers. So we will continue our effort by obtaining more interview data. So if you feel like you can help us, and please let us know, and we greatly appreciate your support. Thank you.